The Guardian reports that an online hate forum, their terminology, called Kiwi Farms has been shut down after users of the far-right forum harassed and stalked allegedly a trans Twitch streamer, Clara Sorrenti. Sorrenti alleges that people from Kiwi Farms swatted her, sent police to her house, etc. Eventually, Sorrenti fled her home. Here's some of her story on CNN.
Earlier this year, when Sorrenti began using the platform to talk about trans rights, she caught the attention of Kiwi Farms, a notorious online forum that has been used to organise transphobic harassment campaigns.
The first thing that they did was find the obituary for my dead father and use it to find his memorialized Facebook page. They were able to find a picture of my dad on the front porch of my childhood home, and from that, use Google Maps and figure out where that was located.
After Sorrenti's home in Ontario was swatted, she moved to a nearby hotel, but her harassers tracked her down there, remarkably using this photo of her cat on her hotel bed.
They were able to cross-reference what they saw on the bed sheets with every other hotel in the city until they found out that the specific bed sheets only had a pattern in this one hotel that I was staying at.
Eventually, she says her Uber account was hacked, allowing the online bullies to track her location. It was then she decided to leave Canada, coming here to Belfast in Northern Ireland to stay with her friend.
And I thought that if I got far away and went to a different continent, they wouldn't be able to do the same thing. And then it turned out I was wrong.
Somehow, her harassers tracked her down in Belfast. One of them even came to the apartment building she is staying at, taking this chilling photo full of trans slurs and posted it online.
Okay, so Kiwi Farms, something everyone's been talking about. So this has been taken down, this forum where there was a lot of kind of organized harassment against trans people, trans activists. Also, and this was new, I just saw this, or I saw it yesterday, it has also been scrubbed from the Wayback Machine, the Internet Archive, which is very interesting because they don't usually do that. And in fact, they've gotten very sternly worded requests from people like the Church of Scientology to take down things that they generally don't unless it violates copyright. So this is a pretty big step. Look, obviously I'm not going to offer any defense of this forum whatsoever. It sounds like a really vile place engaged in potentially criminal behavior, the people on it, at least. I mean, that is criminal behavior, making false reports, stalking people, etc. So to the extent, and I can understand being, what is it, Cloudflare, the web hosting service, I guess if they don't want to be complicit in criminal activity, you might take an action like this, but we should be a little careful here. I mean, I suspect you'll agree that the tendency, to just vanish things from the internet if they make people uncomfortable. Now, this is obviously going way further than just making people uncomfortable, but it, I think, can set a bad precedent. Especially the internet, the Wayback Machine offers a lot of helpful accountability in cases where people want to disappear things that ought to be left up in the public kind of knowledge.
Yeah, so, you've been consistent about, not attributing, not blaming people who weren't directly responsible for things that they might have facilitated and things like that. But you've also been clear that you thought that swatting was a line that was should be drawn in the sand.
Yeah.
I think it was who Marjorie Taylor Greene was being swatted a couple of weeks ago. So it seems clear that this is beyond the pale and that there's a level of stalking, frankly, and genuine endangerment that comes when you swat someone, when police arrive at your house with guns drawn and what have you, that justifies some of the measures that have been taken against the site. The focus of the conversation now, it seems, is largely on whether or not the Wayback Machine overreached. And earlier this year, when RT was banned in certain areas and people's shows were taken down, including journalist Abby Martin, who had an RT show in which she was very vocal about criticizing Russia, for example, for the annexation of Crimea, she lost a lot of her archives and only was able to restore some of it because her mom happened to have them all on like CD-ROM in her house, right?
Yeah.
So there is something I think that we should keep an eye on with respect to permanently stripping content from the internet, because so many of us believe that the internet is kind of forever and we don't keep those kind of hard copy backups. that are part of our broader historical archive and contain information that I think a lot of us think is useful and valuable. In this case, it's not clear to me, and I'd like to know more about whether or not there was concern that if the Wayback Machine kept her personal information up, it would continue to put her at danger. And if so, was there possible
doxing information?
Yeah.
I don't
know. Is it possible to take some of that off without taking off the whole records?
I agree with you. I could certainly understand the Wayback Machine having a policy of not preserving your address or something, or your telephone number if you're a private person. I in fact think social media sites should have policies against allowing stuff like that to be published. Now, of course, there's a difference between, going back to what you were saying, there is a difference between the individual and the platform, right? So a lot of this was being organized by Kiwi, on Kiwi Farms, not by Kiwi, on Kiwi Farms. So maybe it's so pervasive that you could credibly say that's just like what the site is and what it does. But obviously very obnoxious and very bad behavior is organized on Twitter and on Instagram and on Facebook. And those sites are not, thrown off of the internet, the hosting service. This was a criticism, I think a very fair criticism, when can't even remember what they were called after the January 6th, when the right-wing Parler got thrown off because because people on Parler were engaged in some very bad, potentially criminal activities. I understand. But so were people on Facebook.
Yeah.
So it starts to get very.
And wasn't there some censorship of PayPal or shutting down of PayPal accounts and things like that?
Yeah.
So when the
and U.S. law treats the user and the platform as distinct entities. It's a very clear. And it's unique to U.S. law, Section 230, saying the platform is not the speaker. The speaker is the speaker. You can arrest those people if you made a false report to police, even without making swatting more criminal. It's still illegal. You could prosecute those people. You could prosecute people for stalking. You can't prosecute the platform for stalking. You can prosecute the platform in some unique cases having to do with sex trafficking and some other things because the law is very specific. And that's the U.S. approach, which is different than like the European approach. Actually, the European approach is much more favorable to disappearing things from the internet. So you can petition Google under European law and say, I want this Google result of me gone, and Google has to consider the request, the right to be forgotten, the right to be forgotten.
Yeah, well, look, this is what people like Zephyr Teachout argue. She has these robust conversations where she says, well, if the platform is acting like a publisher, should it be treated like a publisher? Which I think is a great way to think about it, because if Kiwi Farms is exercising editorial control, exercising censorship control to a certain degree with its platform, then at what point do they have so much control over what's actually being said on the site that they can't hide behind the idea of being a neutral third party?
Right. The law currently basically says no matter how much, even if you exercise editorial control, no matter how much moderating you do, you are still not being counted as the speaker of the information. Because, and frankly, that is not a totally wrong way to approach the situation. They wanted to make it clear that if you take down, if you want your site to take down like harassment and pornography and everything, we're not going to suddenly treat you as a publisher because you did some kind of editorializing. Now, but when this was conceived in the 90s, before our current climate of political censorship was a kind of a topic.
Some of the algorithm, there's been an argument that changes to the algorithm, which actually literally do promote certain kinds of content, are different than a kind of moderation or censorship regime, and that maybe that does cross the line over to publishing.
Right, but I could see that argument, certainly, but under current law, it's just that would not fly. So many courts have said that wouldn't fly. So it's interesting. I think we ought to be very careful, even though this sounds like a uniquely bad site where some really bad stuff was happening. Stalking people, harassing people, doxing people, even if you don't like them, even if they're activists for a cause you're totally against, that is never, it's just utterly disgusting behavior, criminal behavior, truly criminal behavior. Don't do it. So, despite all of that, I have concerns about just disappearing things from the internet. We are more on under U.S. law and U.S. tradition. We're free speech maximalists. And I don't think that's the wrong approach. But where you make free speech, where you make privacy, the trade-off between speech and privacy. It's interesting. It's tough.
You're not the only one with that concern. Matt Taibbi tweeted, he's obviously kept his finger on the pulse of these issues and has been kind of free speech watchdog of sorts, tweeted, "I've been concerned for a long time about the disappearance of old material. The Wayback Machine doesn't seem to have much of a purpose if people can ask to have old published work taken down. I don't care about the subject unless it's libelous or illegal. It should stay up."
Right.
So these are the competing camps, and I'm sure that this conversation won't end anytime soon. We'll have more Rising for you after this.